In today's video, we are going to see some of the common parameters and their functionalities in Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation. If you're watching my video for the first time, my name is Sriram Sivashankaran and I have been posting videos, articles, and documents related to Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operation, supply chain, and finance related modules, materials. So if you want to get regular updates, please do follow my profile. So in today's video, we are going to see the parameters of procurement and sourcing module. So in order to navigate to parameters, go to procurement and sourcing, setup, and then procurement and sourcing parameters. So in procurement and sourcing parameters, there are multiple tabs which are available. So now in today's video, we're going to check the general tab. So first option is update order lines. So update order lines basically sends you a prompt in order to give you an indication that if there are any dimension changes or any field level changes happens at the header, the same changes need to be cascaded to the lines or not. So if it has been if it is a never, then you will not be able to make the changes to the lines. And if it mentioned as always, then any changes which are done at the header will always be cascaded to the lines, and there will be no prompt will be given to the user. And if there is a prompt, then it shows a prompt will be given to the user that some change has been done to header level fields. So do you want to update it at the line level or not? Let's take this example. Let's say if you want to update the site and warehouse at the header, and you want the system to send a prompt whether the same change has to be done in the line or not. Okay, so I'll simply click on OK. I'll go to any of the purchase order. So we have this purchase order. I'll open this. Then you see the site and warehouse at the line level are 2 and 24. Now in the header, if I want to change this to 1 and 13, now when I hit the save button, I want the system to throw a prompt. So it says, do you want to update the site and warehouse because you have made a change for the order lines? Do you want to continue the change to the lines or not? So that's what the update order lines parameter is all about. So user who wants to make the change, they can simply just enable the update site and dimension, and then they can click on OK. So this will cascade the changes in the header to the line. So now the site and warehouse, which we changed from 2 and 24 to 1 and 13, has been changed in the line level also, right? So this is about update order lines. Any changes in the header will be cascaded to the line also. Then we have purchase type. By default, we have three purchase types: journal, purchase order, and return order. Journals are just a record in the system which will not have any impact in your inventory transactions. But purchase orders are basically the orders which are issued to the vendor for any receipt of material. And return orders are basically the purchase types which are used to return any of the materials from our warehouse. So if I'm as a warehouse guy, I'm going to do a lot of purchase orders, and I want to keep this a purchase type whenever I create a purchase order. Let's say uh, let's say purchase order is the one which I'm going to do often. Then whenever I click on new, then system is going to create a new purchase order with the type purchase order, right? By default, it creates a purchase order. But instead, if I'm going to, as a warehouse person, I'm going to do a lot of return orders, then if I keep the setup as a return order for purchase order purchase type, then whenever I create a purchase order, you see the it will be created with returned orders by default. So this is the second setup, and third setup is return action default. See, whenever we return materials back to vendors, we need to it's a best practice to capture the reason or the action why we are returning this material quantities to the vendor. So this is a separate submaster where you can capture the details for the return. So in this case, I have already created a submaster with defective, cancelled, and vendor error, right? So let's say I am just wanted to capture this region as vendor error, and then I hit the save button. And then in the purchase order, let's say if I create a new return order for a vendor, um, I just want to, okay, for this vendor I'm going to create a return order. It's a return order from warehouse 24. Then I hit the OK button. Yeah, and of course, if it is a return order, then RMA number is mandatory. Return merchandise authentication. So the vendor has authorized for return. So this is the authentication number. So once you give the RMA number and hit the OK button, so now here you can add the item. But our particular setup comes over here. See, I think in the setup, if you go to setup, you see the return action by default it has picked 30 vendor error because it has picked primarily from the parameter. And then next setup is the purchase pool. Purchase pool basically helps you in grouping the purchase orders. So basically this purchase pool will be available whenever you create a new purchase order. Let's say if I click on new, and then see, this is by default the purchase pool which has been taken from the procurement and sourcing parameter. So there is nothing much to talk about this. So we will quickly get to the other one. So here, first one is the prompt when specifying vendor and invoice account. So system, if you want the system to send you a prompt that you want to change the terms of payment, other vendor related information whenever there is a change in the vendor account. So that's what this prompt is going to do. Let's say without enabling this, I'm saving this. Then I will go back and create a purchase order. Maybe I'll use an existing purchase order. Yeah, this is an existing purchase order. Now I'll click on the purchase order, and in the header, for some reason I want to change this purchase vendor account. Let's say I'm changing it from Contoso office supply to City Power Light. Right now, when I hit the save button, see, it is basically asking us for the update in the order lines. So I'm not going to do that. I click on cancel, but there is no prompt saying that do you want to transfer the changes, vendor related changes, from City Power Light or not. So there was no prompt received by us, right? So still I will continue to keep this as US 111. Okay, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this prompt, then I hit the save button. Now when I'm try to change the maybe I'll try to change it back to uh, City Power Cut. You see there is a prompt which says transfer vendor information to City Power and Light or not. Yes. So so D365 gives us a functionality to send us a prompt so that you are doubly sure about the conscious decisions which you are making, that when you are changing a vendor account for a purchase order, D365 sends us a prompt. So that's the whole reason of having this particular parameter. So I will cancel this. I will go back. Then we'll look into the next parameter. The next parameter is to prompt the quantity field. See, generally in the purchase orders, I will take any confirmed purchase orders. Let's say this is a confirmed purchase order. So when we go to product receipt, we have the quantity drop down. So quantity option basically helps us to identify the ordered quantity, receive now or registered quantity, right? So this particular option which is available in the procurement and sourcing in the product receipt page will help us to identify the quantity with which we want to close the product receipt, right? So now in this case, if we want to always keep the ordered quantity and by some reason some other option has been used, then system will throw us a prompt saying that do you want to change it to ordered quantity or not. Let's say product receipt can be posted from multiple pages, possibly from procurement and sourcing. If I go to procurement and sourcing, you can close it from probably in receiving products. Post product receipt option can be used, or from the directly from the purchase order. Or also we made a video, yeah, regarding the item arrival. So item arrival also another option using which you can post the product receipt. So I am not going to talk in detail about it, but let's say if I'm going to create an item arrival, these are posted, right? So now once I click on product receipt, I think we have, okay, this is purchase order is not confirmed. Okay, maybe I'll select another purchase order, sorry, another arrival journal. Mm, okay, I think this is also not confirmed. uh, So this product receipt by default, you see we didn't get any prompt as of now, right? So now let's say if I cancel this, and then in the procurement and sourcing parameter, I'm going to enable this particular toggle, then I save it. Then once again, if I go back to the product receipt page, I'm going to get a prompt. See, the current quantity is registered quantity. the recommended value is order quantity. Do you want to apply the recommend value or not? So every time when the store user is doing the product receipt, he will get a prompt that do you want to change it to recommended value, which is order quantity, yes or no. So the user will make a conscious decision in completing the product receipt. That's the need for this particular prompt, right? So I will disable this, then click on save. The next option is automatically recalculate fact boxes. So this is basically used when you want to recalculate the fact boxes in the purchase order line, primarily when charges are applicable. So let's say I have already created a purchase order in this case. So I will navigate to accounts payable, all purchase orders. So I have created already. We have also published a document regarding the charges. If you have missed it, please check out the document which I have shared in procurement and sourcing, and then charges, automatic charges. So I have created a setup for this particular vendor. So we are going to see how this charges will be automatically calculated. Let's say if I go to the purchase order, and then I will probably okay. Okay, let's create a new purchase order. What's wrong in it? So we will quickly create a new purchase order. Okay, wholes- wholesales, site and warehouse. Then I hit the OK button. Okay, this is by default since we based on setup, it does create system has taken it as a return order, but we are not creating a return order. We are going to create a purchase order right now. So now I need to add the same item. So then going to add the purchase order quantity. Let's say it is 100. So fact boxes are basically at the right hand side of it. So here you will be able to view the purchase order totals, everything. So once if I click on save, you see the purchase order is first of all saved, but the moment if I get inside, the charges are not calculated. Every time user has to come to this page and check the fact boxes, click on refresh, and then the charges are getting calculated. If there are multiple lines, I cannot do this refresh every time, right? I may forget about it. So in those cases, if I enable this automatically recalculate fact boxes and then click on save, then once again if I going to go down and then update the quantity, and then once if I save the page, automatically the charges are recalculated. So I didn't hit the refresh button now. So if you want to recalculate every time without clicking the refresh button for the fact box related informations, then you need to enable this toggle, right? So I will disable this right now. And then the next option is disallow renumbering. I'm sure most of you might be knowing about this, because renumbering is generally not a best practice. Because if I try to renumber a particular line, then system will not allow me to do that, because renumbering of lines is not allowed, and this is not a best practice to do that. But if you disable this particular option, because it clearly says you need to check with your system administrator, but that's what I said, this is not a recommended option. But still, if I disable this and then if I try to change the line number, I'll be able to renumber the lines in purchase orders. So that's the whole idea of this particular setup. And then the next setup which we have is enable change to bill to address on purchase order. So this is a very important setup. Maybe most of the scenarios where we have a bill to different bill to and ship to addresses, you want the material in a specific location, but you want your invoices to be sent to a corporate office or your head office. So in those cases, you need to raise a purchase order with the different bill to and ship to addresses, right? So how you can do that is, first of all, you in the organization administration, and then legal entities. In USMF, you need to add the list of addresses for which your invoices and delivery are applicable. So I have already added a ship to bill to addresses. So you need to ensure that the purpose has to be delivery and invoice. So you create whenever if you are going to create a let's say any address, you need to ensure the purpose has to be both delivery and also invoice. So that's how you get the address details in your bill to and ship to drop downs. So this particular setup, what it exactly tells us, let's say I'm going to get into the purchase order. So in the procurement and sourcing module, we have not enabled this change to bill to address. So by default, we can view only one bill to address. We will not be allowed to change it. Let's say I open this particular purchase order in the header section, and in the header section, if I go to addresses first tab, you see by default only the delivery address I am able to change it, but the bill to address I will not be able to make any changes, right? But instead, if I enable this parameter, I save this and then I quickly refresh this page, because a hot refresh is required for this setup to reflect in our system. So once again, if I go back to the same purchase order, but this time you can see, this time if I enable edit, then this time if you see, I have been given the option by system that I will be able to change the bill to address also. So now Portsmouth and sanitizable, whatever we have added, is also available right now, so I can choose the different bill to address. So that's the beauty of having this particular toggle enabled. And then talking about the next two, I think give purchase order created via purchase requisitions draft approval status. I think it is very well clear from the definition itself. And any purchase orders created via purchase requisitions will have draft say approval status. So that's the whole idea about it. And this is also very clear purchase orders. If you want to print the prices and amounts in the purchase related confirmation documents, then you need to enable this. And you can decide it if you want your purchasing team, or if you want to know them, if you want to know the price and amounts, then you can enable this in the purchasing documents, or else you can disable this. And the most important setup is activate change management, because change management controls tracking of your changes and workflows. So this is very important to ensure that all your purchase orders are undergoing the process of workflow. And if you want to override the settings per vendor, then this toggle has to be enabled, which means this setup is by default is applicable to all your vendors, but based on the vendor basis, if you want to approval for certain vendors and you don't want the approval for certain vendors, then you need to enable allow override settings per vendor. Let's say we get into the vendor master, go to accounts payable, then all vendors. If you go to all vendors, then if I select any specific vendor, then in any of the vendor you will be able to see there is a purchase order defaults for step. Yeah, this is purchase order default step for step. So now if I enable this override setting, I'm able to enable this because in the procurement and sourcing I've enabled to allow override. If I disable this toggle, then hit the save button, then I will not be able to enable the override settings. Actually, I'm clicking on the mouse, but I'm unable to enable the override settings, right? But to enable the override settings per vendor, I need to enable this at the parameter, and then I have to enable the override settings, because without enabling this, I will not be able to override the settings available in the parameter based on the vendor basis setup. So let's say now I enable this active change management at the vendor level. I hit the save button, and then I disable the active change management in the parameter level. Okay, so I hit the save button again. So now actually I have enabled active change management at the vendor level, but at the parameter level I have disabled it, right? So let's quickly create a purchase order for this vendor. So you can see now how this parameter is helpful. So at the parameter level I have disabled it. So now you can see still the active change management is enabled, even though I have disabled it for at the parameter. But since at the vendor level I have enabled it, system still enables the active change management. Let's say if I cancel this and I'm going to create a vendor for it, sorry, purchase order for a different vendor. Let's say K wholesales, and I update the warehouse. Now in this case, you see the active change management is disabled because it primarily takes the setup from the parameter. But since we have enabled allow override settings per vendor, it has taken the setup from the vendor based on per vendor basis for this particular vendor, Datum Corporation. But for the other vendor, still the active change management is applicable. right? So, and the last one is about the purchase agreement in intercompany orders, which we have already discussed in detail about our intercompany order document. Please check out the same. So these are all the setups which are primarily available in procurement and sourcing parameters in general tab. So if you want to get regular updates further, please do follow my profile. And I'm sure this was a long video. Hope to see you in another video. Thank you.